Hello everybody, this is John Mark Johnson Jr. again, host of Reformed GGA, and I'm here to give my initial impressions of a product that I was recently able to put together. And it's kind of a part of a complex of products that I've been messing with. And that is, as some of you guys know, I've been getting into striker-fired guns, particularly one striker-fired gun, a CZ P-10C, which is what I have here. And I have it in a Galco G19 holster that I've modified a little bit to fit it. And by modified, I mean I took a file to it and filed off the things that got in the way. And then I've went ahead and added a Holosun 407C to it. Go ahead and take this out of the holster and go ahead and check and make sure that the gun is clear. You can see that there's nothing in the mag well. I can feel that there's nothing in the mag well. Go ahead and open up the gun. I can see that there's nothing in the chamber. Give it a shake before I stick my finger in there. I can feel that there's nothing in the chamber, so this gun is safe. I've been, like I said, toying with the idea of just how striker-fired guns have worked, and this has basically been my test bed. And I figured as long as telemarketers, please stop. I figure as long as I'm messing with the idea of a striker-fired gun, I might as well mess with some other things too, and figured, hey, why not do a red dot? And so I didn't really feel like permanently altering the gun, and given that this is a fairly inexpensive gun, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to put that much money into it. And so instead of doing the cutout like a lot of people do, I just got a Picatinny rail that you can replace the rear sight with. It's just dovetailed in. You knock out the old dovetail rear sight and you put in the Picatinny rail. You can see the back part of the new Picatinny rail and the front part of it. And then you just directly attach the sight to that rail, and that way you don't have to permanently modify your firearm. There are some disadvantages to it, and one of them is that it raises the sight up off the gun pretty far, and so when you push out, you're going to have to hold the gun physically a little bit lower than you usually would because your sight is higher. That is a little bit of an issue. And another issue that comes up is that this does add a significant amount of weight, and depending on the balance between the recoil of the cartridge that you're dealing with, what weight your slide already has, and the recoil spring, it may cause reliability issues. Now, because of everything that's gone on, I haven't been able to go out and shoot this thing. And I also got laid off from work, so I'm kind of out of money. All these parts were ordered before I got laid off and all that, and they eventually came in and I was able to assemble them. But since I'm laid off, I don't have, discretionary spending anymore, and so yeah, it just kind of sucks. And so I have cool new thing, but I have really no idea how it works because I haven't been able to go out and test everything together yet. So, sadness, but I still have been able to play around with it a little bit and notice some things that I wanted to let you guys know about. And like I said, one of them is that the sight is very high, and so I find myself having to lower the gun just a little bit from what I'm used to. That's an issue that some people have. There is definitely some weight that is attached when you decide to put it on top of the slide instead of cut out into the slide, and that can become an issue. I don't know if it is an issue with this gun or not yet because I haven't been able to shoot it like this. But I know that it has been an issue for other people who have done this with their guns, of putting the slide on top, and with putting the sight on top instead of in a cutout. So it's a possibility. We'll see when we get there. And then another thing that I noticed that was just kind of interesting about it, and I'll go ahead and let you guys see what the red dot is, where I checked and made sure that the gun is clear, so this is safe, but see if I can get it so you can see it in the camera there. There you go, there's the red dot. As you guys can see, that window is relatively small. At its widest, it's about 7/8 of an inch wide, and about 2/3 roughly of an inch high. It's not a very big viewing window. And if you're like me, when you push out with a handgun with normal open sights, my tendency is that I push out with the barrel slightly high so that I can see the front sight, and then I can just drop it into the rear notch. And that's how I align the gun as I'm drawing it to shoot. Well, with this red dot on there, I found out very quickly that doesn't really work very well. Just because if you're looking through the sights and you push up as you're going out, you're going to lose the red dot. You can't see the red dot at all. You have to bring it down, and it's fairly specific on where it is. Let's see if I can get it here. There we go. You can see the red dot if you're looking at it just right, but most of the time you're not going to be able to see it from any given angle. It's a fairly small window, and you have to be directly behind that window in order to see it properly, and the gun has to be properly oriented in order for you to pick up the red dot. So if you want to acquire your sight quickly without having to sit there and fiddle with it going all over the place, you need to be able to push out in such a way that you're basically already looking at that window in the correct orientation. And the way that I usually push out for open sights, front sight, rear notch, doesn't work. Like I said, I usually point out with the barrel slightly high and then drop the front sight into the notch. Doesn't work because this window is fairly small and it's pretty specific on where you have to be. And initially I didn't like that, and there were some people that were there when I first had it set up, and this is before all the quarantine stuff happened and all that, and they were playing around with it and they didn't like it either because it took a while to find the silly thing. I did find though that if you just practice on pushing out and pushing basically slightly down compared to what you're used to, you can actually get on sight pretty quickly and pretty accurately. But you really have to spend some time working on pushing out properly. It's a different orientation. Instead of pushing out high and dropping down, you basically already have to start down. And if you do that and you have something to orient it, basically doing an isosceles stance instead of going to one side, but if you're isosceles, your arms are basically the same going out and your gun is in the center, you can achieve that pretty easily. But it does take time and it does take practice, and to begin with it is definitely going to feel weird. Like I said, the new sight is pretty high off the gun, so you're holding the gun down, and then it's going to feel like you're pointing the gun down when you're pushing out compared to what you're used to, at least for me. Like I said, I usually keep my eye on the front sight and then drop it into the rear notch. So it's definitely different, but if you practice enough, you can get used to pushing out with that red dot basically where you want it to be, and then it's a very small adjustment from there. So, there's lots of people online that I've seen touting these things as being so much quicker to acquire, and there's a lot of things that go into that statement. But as far as how fast is it to get the sight on the target, well, it does wind up being quicker in most of the time, and I've have other guns that I still have open sights with, of course, and I've looked at it side by side and figuring out what's going on, and I have found that this one actually is faster, and the main reason for that is just because of the difference in presentation. The other guns, like I said, I point slightly high and then drop down. This one, though, I can't do that, so I have to push out pretty much already down, and so it's pretty much already right on target. It's a very small adjustment from there. And so it is faster, but it's not faster because the sight is necessarily, magically better in terms of it just suddenly appears and it's so easy. Instead, what it is it's forced me to get better at pointing my pistol basically already on target. Like I said, it's a very small window, and you've got to get used to putting that very small window pretty much exactly where you want it. And so what you're really working on is your aiming ability, and not so much aiming, but your point ability. Your initial push out and point, your initial presentation is what you're honing. And if your initial presentation is basically already on target, then yeah, it's of course going to be faster because you don't have much adjustment from there to go. My open sight guns, I don't do that with. Open sight guns, as I start high and then I drop it down, and that extra little bit of adjustment is what slows me down. It's not that the sight is faster, it's that my presentation is faster. At least that's been my experience. Like I said, I haven't been able to actually go out and do real world testing and shooting, but just in terms of presentation, as far as which one presents faster, this one presents faster basically because you have to. With this sight, especially with that window being as small as it is, I can't be off by too much. So my presentation basically has to be in that window to begin with, and then it's a very small correction from there to get the red dot on the target. And so it's not so much a better sight as it is a sight that requires me to be better at presenting. So it is faster in that regard, I will certainly say. Another thing that I have found that I do like about it is that the red dot eliminates a lot of the focus problems that I usually have with traditional open sights. Traditional open sights, of course, you have a notch in the rear, which this one still has. This notch is a little high compared to the front post. If I wanted to use that, I'd have to get a higher front post. But normally you have your rear notch, your front post, and the target, and those are three different things at three different focal lengths of your eyes that you're trying to align. And I've got some pretty major vision issues, and I definitely have some focus issues and eye dominance issues on top of that. And so getting all three of those things to line up, the rear notch, the front post, the target, all of them to line up properly and well, especially under varying lighting conditions, and the glare can definitely be a problem for me and things like that. All those different conditions really mess with me, and sometimes I can shoot handguns very accurately, and then there's other times that my group looks a little bit more similar to a shotgun blast than it does to an actual handgun. And a lot of times it's eye problems, and occasionally sometimes it's fatigue and things like that, but most of the time it's eye problems, either eye dominance issues or focal issues. The nice thing about the red dot is that like all red dots, all that issues are taken care of. Your focal distance is the target itself, and you're just moving the red dot until it's on the target. And so trying to switch between the rear notch and the front sight and the target itself basically is a non-issue. It's just put the shiny red bead on whatever you're trying to hit and pull the trigger. Like I said, I haven't been able to test it in the real world, but just in terms of being confident that I'm actually on target when I think I'm on target, this has been a great improvement in that regard. Just testing it around the apartments, completely empty of course, or using dummy rounds of course, in a safe direction, etc. But testing it around the apartments, not only do I find myself getting on target a little bit quicker, mostly just because of having to present accurately with this gun, whereas other guns are a little bit more forgiving. I get on target quicker because I have to, and then I'm also a lot more confident that my shot is actually going to hit where I want it to. Not that I've actually been shooting, I still need to test it, but just my confidence that I'm actually holding where I think I'm holding is so much easier because I can actually focus on the target directly, and I don't have to worry about switching my vision to something that's nearer. I can always focus out there, and the red dot is going to follow suit with that. I'm not actually focusing on the red dot itself, I'm just making sure that it covers the target. That is a lot easier on the eyes for me, gives me a lot greater confidence that I'm not going to have a lot of the usual vision problems that I do. And so where do I stand with regard to my initial impressions of this thing? Red dots on pistols, so far for me, seems like it's a decent win, but there are caveats to it. Like I said, one, putting it up on a special rail like this definitely does add weight, and I'm not sure what that's going to do to the reliability of the gun. My defensive loads that I run are usually NATO spec ammo or plus P spec, so those have a little bit more oomph, so I don't think it's going to be a big issue in terms of reliability, but until you test you don't know. That is a bit of an issue, and then there is definitely a learning curve with these that you don't necessarily have with other, that you don't usually have with the open sights. With open sights, yes, you do need to train on those to learn them, but as far as getting familiar with that particular gun, I don't personally feel that it requires as much time. You know, if you happen to leave a gun alone for a few months and then that has open sights and you bring it to the range one day, and as long as you know how open sights work in general, you're probably going to be able to push out and get on target at a fairly consistent rate and get fairly consistent hits with what you are able to do with other guns, so long as you can, you know, see the sights decently well and the gun's decently accurate. This, though, is very, very, very specific. Like I said, there's one specific window that you have to be able to get that dot in as you push out. And that is really going to be, and how you hold it to do that is going to be really particular to the gun. This gun has a particular angle to its handle, particular ergonomics, particular way that I hold it. And so being effective with this gun means that I have to spend quite a bit of time with it in order to get everything lined up properly. So I have to spend a lot more time practicing my draw and presentation that I don't feel like I have to do with other guns. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I'll let you guys make that up, make your decision up for yourselves. Me, I see it as being a bad thing if you want to be able to transition to a lot of different kinds of guns. But if you're willing to take this and make this your dedicated gun that you normally spend time with anyways, and you're willing to put in a little bit of time on the front end of it to get used to how it presents, then I don't think it'll be an issue at all. Now, are you someone who wants to spend that extra time getting used to how you have to present with it? That's going to depend on the person. But for me, I don't consider it to be a big issue. And right now, since I'm laid off and under the general quarantine that the whole state is under, I have time to go around practicing in a safe direction, pointing my pistol. Under different circumstances, that might not be the case. But right now, I can walk around the apartment pointing it in a safe direction, completely unloaded or with dummy rounds, of course, and practice to my heart's content, getting just the right presentation. So for me, it's not an issue. But if you're someone who doesn't handle your gun very often, it normally just sits in a drawer somewhere or up on a shelf somewhere, and you take out the gun 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 times a year max to go and shoot it, then a red dot is probably going to be more frustrating than anything else, especially if you have it configured this way. Like I said, if you do the actual cutout like a lot of them do, which does cost more money, if you do an actual cutout, of course you don't have as much added weight, and so the reliability issues are usually not going to be there. And then if you do the cutout with some raised rear and front sights, you can often co-witness, and you can actually use your regular sights to get on target like you normally would. And then the red dot is basically there just to make sure that vision issues, the issues of different focal planes and whatnot that can become an issue for some of us, don't wind up becoming an issue for you. For those kinds of people, you can see the red dot, especially if, like I said, you do the actual cutout in the slide, the red dot becomes an augment to your regular sights, and there's a little bit more of an ease of transition. With me raising it up like this, I can't really see my regular sights at all, and the front one isn't at the right height for the rear one anyways, because it's mounted to the actual rail that sits above the slide now. So for me, that doesn't work. I have to practice presenting in that window. And if you're willing to take the time and you're willing to be dedicated to that platform, great. Otherwise, not so much. But I do definitely enjoy the fact that it has made me better at presenting. I definitely see where I am getting faster at picking up the target just because I'm presenting on target better. And then I also don't have the focal length issues that normally plague me. I am nearsighted, meaning that I see things close up without my glasses just fine, but as they get further away, then I have a hard time seeing them. And my glasses help me see stuff far away, but the stuff that's near with the glasses on, not always so great, and so seeing the sights, the open sights, a little bit of an issue. The red dot, though, it basically looks like the dot is out there at the target. Technically it's not, but it looks like it's out there at the target, and so the differences in focus are not as big of an issue. Now, eye dominance issues, I don't know how that's going to play out with this. I see, it seems to me that would be less of an issue, but who knows? We'll see with that. But all that to say, my initial impressions are that the idea of putting a red dot on a pistol does have a lot of advantages in terms of forcing you to be better at presenting, eliminating focal length issues for eyes and whatnot. But I could also see where getting used to this for a lot of people could be really frustrating. and so it's not something that I would necessarily recommend for everyone. As far as some of the particular specs of this particular sight that people might be interested in, they might be interested in knowing that the brightness settings are adjustable. The instruction pamphlet does talk about it, and there's like 12 different brightness settings or something like that. I think the smallest one is like a 2 MOA dot, and it goes up to like 6 or 8 or something like that as far as MOA. So you can make it pretty bright. It is fully adjustable, and you can put it into an automatic mode where the solar augment will determine how much power it gives to the dot, or you can manually set it yourself. And the thing that I like most about it is that it will automatically turn off after 10 minutes. You can set it for different lengths, but I find that the 10 minutes is just fine. It automatically turns off after 10 minutes, and it's a shake-awake design, so you just grab it. You can't be too gentle with it. It needs to be a good solid grab. But as long as you actually do something that shakes the gun a little bit, it'll come on, and it will remember whatever your last setting was, and it'll present at that. And that makes the sight have a very long battery life compared to a lot of traditional red dot sights. A lot of the red dot sights that I normally get are also Holosuns, the 403C, and they are great sights, and they're on all the time, and their battery life is pretty good. On low setting, it's somewhere between 30,000 and 50,000 hours. These, though, because they'll automatically turn off after 10 minutes of inactivity, these on a low setting can last 100,000 to 200,000 hours. And considering that this sight, at least at the time that I bought it, was less than $200, that's not bad. That is an incredible battery life for something like this. And given that a year has less than 10,000 hours in it, it's like 8,700 some odd, but less than 10,000 hours in it, if you keep it on a low setting, you're talking about 10 years plus that the battery on this thing will last. That is pretty cool. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't like keeping my sights at that low of a level because I want to be able to use it in all lighting conditions, and of course the brighter the surrounding light, the more light that you're going to need from your red dot. So I typically keep it at a higher level, and I just have the mindset that I'm going to replace the battery once a year or so. And that takes care of all of my issues with all of my red dots. Just, change out the batteries in my red dots when I change out the battery in my smoke detectors, basically. Well, some people do that every 6 months. I'm not one of them. But some kind of a yearly habit that you have that just keeps you in check and makes sure that you go. But the nice thing about this one is if I do forget it a year or two, odds are it's still going to be just fine. And I really like that it turns off automatically after 10 minutes. Really great battery saver. You can put it for longer. I think the longest setting that you can put it on is 12 hours of inactivity, and then it shuts off. I have no idea why you would need that much, but you can do that if you want to. But for me, the 10-minute setting seems to work just fine. And like I said, as long as it's a good solid grab, it'll shake it awake, and the dot will be there, and you'll be able to do whatever you need to do. So cool concept on that one. A few other notes while we're here. In terms of it fitting in the holster, it wasn't a perfect fit for this Galco G19 holster. I do like this holster, but it doesn't fit the CZ P-10C perfectly. Of course, it was made for the Glock, not the CZ, and so I had to do a little bit of grinding to fit the mag release on the right hand side of the gun into the holster, so I had to cut out a little space for it. And then on the other side, this part of the holster that goes up used to have a little flap on it that came out, and the red dot would hit that and it would keep it from seating properly, so I had to file that down. But the nice thing about these plastic holsters is that they're really easy to sand down and modify as you need, and as long as you have something that's fairly fine grit, and you can smooth it out pretty well, and it works pretty decently. So that is it as it is now, and most people, when they see this, they don't know that it has been modified in any significant way. So it's pretty easy and seamless that way. and I like it. It's good and solid, but there was a little bit of adjustment that I needed to do in order to get everything to fit properly. So not a perfect fit, but pretty close. All right, so that is my initial impressions of the Holosun 407C as mounted to a striker-fired pistol by way of a Picatinny rail that replaces the rear sight instead of a cutout. All right, have fun, everyone. See you next time. Bye.